Hello, STS Nation, and welcome back to the Geographic Profiler. I have two very special guests joining me today, Joy Farrow and Laura Frombach. Joy is a retired deputy sheriff with 28 years of experience. She worked road patrol in Pompano Beach, Florida, and faced every situation imaginable. After the 9/11 tragedy, Joy transferred to the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport with the Broward Sheriff's Office to focus on the safety of air travelers. In 2017, Joy assisted with the aftermath of the mass shooting at the airport. She has received numerous letters of commendations and several life-saving awards. Laura was introduced to technology in the U.S. Army working on Pershing nuclear missiles. Having spent much of her career as a technologist and engineer with IBM, HP, FedEx, Coca-Cola Enterprises, Lenovo, and others. A turning point in Laura's life was the aha moment when she correlated her mother's mental illness to domestic violence. She now advocates for local domestic violence shelters. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and today we will be discussing the very important topic of women's safety. Thank you, Joy and Laura, for joining me here today.
Hi, thanks for having us, Doug.
Thank you. We're thrilled to be here.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. And as I mentioned, this is such an important topic. The topic of women's safety is really important to me on a personal and on a professional level. I have so many women in my life whom I love and care about. I have a young daughter of my own. And on a professional level, because so many of the cases I work involve violence against women.
And who doesn't have an important woman in their life?
Absolutely. And I guess just to start off, before we hit record, we were discussing your book and website. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us about your book?
Our book encompasses everything that both of us know professionally and personally about violence against women. As you mentioned, Doug, Joy has professional experience, being a retired deputy sheriff, and I grew up with violence. And when we went to look for this book, after Joy retired, we were talking about it. We went to look for a book like this that was written about women's safety by women for women, and it did not exist. So we had to write it. We really felt that it was incumbent upon us to share all of the knowledge that we learned, particularly for younger women. So many women in their teens, 20s, and 30s are victimized. They're targeted by predators. And really, not having a book by women for women, we actually felt that, that it just wasn't right, that this was a vacuum really that needed to be filled.
And we didn't want to just make it a book of stories and do this, don't do that. So a lot of extensive research went into this.
So it doesn't just include our stories, although those are included as well, from an experience perspective, but also all of the research that backs up all of the assertions that we make, all of the statements that we make are backed by science, they're backed by facts, and they are backed by cases to prove, and we footnoted everything, and our editorial staff checked it numerous times to fact check everything that we said to make sure that everything that we put forth was not just our opinions, but also experience and science together.
And I really appreciated that. And I got the audio book version. So anybody who's interested, you can pick up the book in print or audio. And I really appreciated that it did include your personal stories, because it showed that this is someone that you two are writing this from not only a research perspective, but also a personal experience perspective.
Right. We didn't just write it from behind the desk. We were actually victims and experienced in all of it.
And the other thing, and I mean, I recommend this book to everybody. And one of the books that I've always loved and that I always said I would have my daughter read is Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear. And I put this book, I mentioned this to you beforehand, but I put this book right up there with it. This is a book I definitely recommend to everybody to read. And of course, it has a focus on women. But it's a book that I will definitely have my daughter read when she's a bit older.
Excellent.
And as we mentioned as well, we are huge fans of Gavin de Becker. And Mr. de Becker himself came from a similar background like mine. He talks in his book about being the child in a violent household and how, he had to learn to discern at a moment's notice whether or not that violence was going to occur, and to be able to tell without even thinking, really on a subconscious level, what do I need to do next to stay safe? And we talk about that in our book, sort of an extension of The Gift of Fear, is that our bodies know, our subconsciouses know, long before our conscious mind knows what's going to happen. But as women, we are socialized to be polite, to be generous, to be giving. And so we have been socialized really to push our instincts back down. And women so often tell themselves, we're being foolish. I'm overreacting. And the truth of the matter is, we're not overreacting. That's our instinct saying, watch out, something's coming, before we even have a chance to think.
I really enjoyed many components, many aspects of the book. And I learned a lot from your book. And, one thing I really learned is the more systemic or institutional causes for women being victims of violence. And, I've learned a lot in my own personal academic studies of why specifically Indigenous women are victims of violence, going historically, systemically, and institutionally, but not so much why women in general are victims of violence. My focus is more on the aftermath and how to prevent it from an environmental perspective. So I really appreciated that. All those different pieces of your book.
And to that end, what I'd like to add that our book brings forward is, so we talk about what happens before an event, how women can, again, as Mr. de Becker talks about, our instincts, how can we discern whether violence is going to occur? And also from a aftermath perspective, from a post-traumatic perspective. So not just in terms of, post-traumatic recovery, but post-traumatic growth. And, we are certainly not advocating that the violence is ever justified in any way, shape, or form. The victim is never at fault, but that what Joy and I have experienced is that recognizing and speaking out about the violence that we've experienced and how we've put ourselves back together and experienced really post-traumatic growth and really transformed ourselves from being survivor to thriver, as a lot of people call it, from being a victim to transforming into somebody who advocates for victims and encourages women and all victims, really, because even when men are victimized, nobody wants to be a victim. Everybody's ashamed of being a victim. And, the shame belongs on the perpetrator. It doesn't belong on the victim.
Do you mind telling us a bit about your website and what it provides?
Our website provides, first of all, the overview of who we are. It's actually still in development. But our blog articles and our writings are really what we use to communicate with all people, not just women, but we focus on women because of the emotional and mental aspects, but to communicate our insights on current events and how those current events really feed into the systemic violence against women, the college red zone, coercive control in intimate relationships, how to recognize a potential abuser on the first date, because those abusers target their victims, and they are victims. They target their victims on the first date. How women can keep themselves safe while running. The Giselle Pellicot case in France, where the grandmother was, that whole setup by the husband, and how he enabled dozens of men to come into this woman's home while he drugged her and attack her. So all of this is, we believe, relevant towards women. And like you, Doug, people who love women, in enabling women, again, focusing on the younger women, how to keep themselves safe and how to really communicate the insights that we've learned about predators, again, from a personal and a professional standpoint, so that other people don't have to go through this. It doesn't do anything, to be clear. Our website doesn't do anything to help prosecute perpetrators, to help stop predators. But what it can do is help the victims, the potential victims, reduce their chances by recognizing the patterns, reduce their chances of becoming the victim of a crime.
There's so much great information on your website, and I've been going through it, as I mentioned to the both of you. And some of the articles, the blogs, I absolutely, I love them. They're great reads. They're not incredibly long reads, and I recommend everybody going and checking them out and reading through them. And I learned a lot from them. And one passion of mine, one thing I've always wanted to do, is put together a self-defense type class that focus both on the behavioral and the physical for women specifically. I've provided self-defense training for men and women, a general audience, but I've always felt that I wouldn't be able to do that as a man alone, because there's so many, you don't have the women's perspective, and there's so many components to that you would need a group to put that together with a female perspective. And that was reinforced when I've read your book and I read your articles, that is just, it's so important to have that female perspective.
And we appreciate that too, because so many times the male template is applied to the female experience. And, Joy, of course, has gotten a lot of professional training. I have gone, as a result of my upbringing, have gone to many, many self-defense classes, many, many courses put on always by policemen who don't understand the women's perspective, and don't understand that physically, and emotionally, our abilities are not going to be the same as a man on man. And, Joy has been in many fights, and, she's able to handle herself. But there's a lot of women who don't have, of course, Joy's experience.
And it's very hard to tell women, just kick them in the leg, kick them here, or you can just grab them by the wrist. And, men are, in most cases, 3 times the strength of some women. And, just grabbing them by the wrist is, hard for women to pull away from that, unless you know how. But, a lot of the advice on social media, or, sometimes from some men in some self-defense courses, they'll just give you advice really for another man in a fight, and not accurately for women of all heights, or, whether you're disabled or not, or what you can physically do. I mean, it was hard enough for me to fight men much taller than me, much stronger than me. But, there were other things that I could do that, the average, woman being surprised by somebody being grabbed around the neck or the arm, or held in such a way, they just don't know unless you're trained the right way.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And, I think another big factor is, and I don't know what goes through a woman's mind on a regular basis, but as a man, I'm never worried about even having to confront that situation.
And
If I, right.
that's a problem, right? Exactly. And that's interesting because, a lot of women would agree that, these are the things that they have to leave their house with that men don't. Do men carry pepper spray? Or men told, be careful when you go here, look around when you leave the car and the store, and hold your purse. Like, I mean, there were so many things along with everything else that women have to do the second they get up in the morning. And that's from being in a comfortable household. So think if they're living in a household that's stressful or abuse. So those are only added things that they have to, think about, and then how to keep themselves safe, on the bus, on the train, wherever they're just plain walking out and around, jogging, any activity outside lately is a headline in crime. None of these crimes are one-off crimes. A lot of these predators have a history.
If I could just point out one more thing, so many women are out and about with children. So not only do they have to keep themselves safe, they have to keep their children safe as well. And so all of the thought processes and the preparation around keeping not only ourselves safe, but our children safe, especially a single mom, with young kids. And, she goes shopping. We see them, at the grocery store, Target, all the time. They're taking the little one out of the back seat. Their back is completely exposed. Maybe they have another child with them. How do they keep themselves safe? And, all of, again, the thought processes that they have to go through to not be targeted. We know one mom who locks herself in the back seat, locks the car while she takes her child out of the car seat, then gets out of the car, looking around to make sure, and this is just in the parking lot, making sure that she's not a target. So, again, these are things that a lot of people, particularly men, don't have to think about. And so we just want to point out, all of the things that women have to keep in account, let alone what are we going to get at the grocery store?
Of course. And that's a great example. And it kind of leads into one of your blog articles on the 5 ways that to improve your situational awareness. And you just mentioned one of them, just being aware of your surroundings. But what are some of the other ways that women can improve their situational awareness when they're out and about?
Use your peripheral vision more. Just take in the whole area and just give it a quick look and stop looking at your phone. We're getting text all the time. We're on the phone. All of a sudden, everybody's very busy and the phone is, necessary. But, the phone is a downfall for us when we're on the phone, because as soon as your attention is taken away, that's when, it takes a second for, predators and opportunists to see, not paying attention, I'm going to grab the purse.
The other thing is that studies have shown that when women are out and about, one study has talked about our subconscious minds can take in 11 million bits of information per second, but our conscious minds are only aware of 40 bits of information per second. So our bodies, our sights, the sounds, the smells, and everything are all being fed into our subconscious, but our conscious mind can only, take in this much of it. For women, we have an additional burden, and studies have shown this. We have an additional burden upon our conscious awareness that leads into our situational awareness, is we are always worried about how we're perceived. So somebody comes up to us and says, "Excuse me, miss, we want to make sure that we're friendly. We want to make sure we don't upset them." So that takes our situational awareness, that little 40 bits per second, and reduces it in half. Studies have shown that our situational awareness is only half that of a man because of our social and emotional conditioning. So what we try to encourage women to do is reduce those social expectations. If somebody says to you, "Excuse me, ma'am," you don't want to be rude. You want to give them a glance, but you don't want to let that person keep talking and coming closer. We've known women personally where the "excuse me, ma'am," a friend of ours was mugged in a bank. He came up, he was friendly, he was personal. "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a second?" "Sure, what's up?" And he pulled the gun and grabbed her purse and knocked her to the ground. So as far as women are concerned, those societal expectations really are a burden upon us as far as our personal safety. So as Joy said, be aware of really what's going on around you. What can you listen to? If you have ear pods in or earbuds, keep them in transparent mode so that you can really pay attention to what all 5 of your senses are saying, and reduce your expectations on yourself to respond to what everybody out and about is trying to get your attention. Because if you don't know that person, the chances are pretty good that they don't intend any good for you.
We're not saying be rude wherever you go, but your safety is paramount. And usually when men are stopping women, now we're not going to say that women aren't predators too, but we're looking at men as the predators that are usually physically attacking women. And when men are stopping women in the parking lot, they want to talk to you when you're out hiking or jogging or going to the store. And it's just usually a question. You're in the parking lot, the parking garage. "Excuse me." Men don't usually ask women a question out of the blue. Come on, they're going to figure it out. But women are just so conditioned to want to respond to an answer. "Oh, I have that for you. Oh, let me answer that for you." So when you stop, you've now closed the gap and they take a couple steps closer. So now you have to decide what to do. Are you going to talk longer, or is it time to run away? Have you just realized this wasn't a good idea? So these are things to keep in mind when you are out and around. And are you carrying some form of a self-defense tool so you can be ready and have it ready near your purse so you don't have to dig around for it? But, these are things that we want women to be a little more prepared when they are out and around, because women are so busy today and you just have so much on your mind. And when you hear somebody come up and say, "Oh, excuse me," you're like, "Oh, yeah." And we say, women are not the world's Swiss Army knife. You are not out there to answer everybody's question. Just can't happen.
Those are all great points. And one thing in my work that I often tell people is we look, but we don't see.
Exactly.
And a lot of that applies to what you're saying here. And another point that you made, I think, in that article, to always be aware of entry and exit points. if you have to get out of a situation, and it just resonates. And I can see that how it crosses over into what, what I do in my field of work as well. And I thought it was, an excellent read.
Great, thank you. And one of the things to add to all of this is when we prime our brains to be ready for a situation, as simple as the exit signs. If you're out shopping, where's the exit sign? I'm here, here's the exit sign. I'm here, here's the exit sign. And it's just as simple as noticing. You're priming your brain. So if something does happen, God forbid some situation occurs, that you know exactly what to do, because otherwise your brain's going to freeze. If you don't know what to do, and this has been proven in many studies as well, when people don't know what to do, they freeze. And once they stop freezing, then they either fight or they flee. But that first instinct, while you're trying to process, while your brain is trying to catch up with what's going on, is to just stand there and do nothing. During the 9/11 attacks on the tower, so many people didn't know what to do. They just froze in place for sometimes 10 minutes before they finally were able to respond. And oftentimes, sadly, that's too late.
And there've been plenty of disasters in malls, besides shooting, but there've been fires or fires in a club, and a situation where people didn't know how to get out. And the exit was the simplest way, and it wasn't the way you came in. So that's something to keep in mind when you're out and around, or somewhere that you're visiting, or you haven't been to that club or restaurant. Besides the way you came out mentally, that's what everybody is going to remember. But you want to look around and know that there are other exits. In every restaurant, in every mall, there are other exits to get out. The food court, the stores, they don't all go out the front.
That's great. That's great advice. And, on the freezing thing, I guess it's not just a fight or flight. It's almost a fright, fight or flight.
Right.
It's different responses to these situations. Looking at it from the offender's perspective, or somebody intent on doing somebody harm, and this kind of leads into one of your other articles. How does somebody that has intent on committing a violent sexual act, how do they select their victims?
The way any other predator in the wild selects their victims, the weakest link. They look for body language. They look for, to go back to what we just said, excuse me, ma'am, they look for kindness. Can they approach without a threat? Can they select somebody that's not going to fight back, or they don't think they're going to fight back? Can they select somebody that's going to be the easiest to overcome, that they can get what they want without a large investment of their own resources? And I'll give you an example. You can't see a lot of me, but I'm a relatively small person. I'm 5'3", 110 pounds, and I have been selected by predators too many times just because of the way I'm built. And, I was just thinking this morning, I've been attacked at least 3 times, and I've been approached 4 times. The 4th time, the guy just came up to me in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and he said, I could pull my gun on you, or you could just hand me some money right now. And I gave him a 10, and he walked away. But the 3 other times, I was physically attacked. Now, the first time did not have a good outcome. But what I did was I learned the same way that predators do. I am not going to be in that situation again. And predators know from each time that they attack somebody, they learn, they train. And so the first time I was attacked was in a laundromat, bad outcome. The second time and the third time I was attacked, the second time was in a bus station, and the third time it was out in the country with a friend. We decided to go swimming, right after it got light, and we got attacked. The second and the third time, I developed my personal tactic of punching in the throat and driving towards not just the windpipe, but pushing towards the spine. And that happened, the second and third times. And Joy has had too many fights to even talk about. But from a predator profiling perspective, I fit that profile. And, I'm the kind of person that predators look for. So I could be easily overcome, or they think I could be easily overcome. And I showed at least two of them that, I fight back, but they look for people that they don't think will fight back. And so I think back in the day when I was attacked, my body language was different. Perhaps I wasn't as confident. Perhaps I wasn't as strong. I train now. I train in the gym. I train to be strong. I train to be confident. And I don't think a predator would look at me today and say I would be their first choice. So predators do look for victims. They profile victims the same way that law enforcement profiles predators. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And, they look for the distracted person. Are you distracted with the big headphones on, the little headphones, whether you're jogging, hiking, biking, something where they know the route and, they know the area. And if they do attack, they know how they're going to get out. So, it's good for you when you're out and around to know, I've never taken this bike route before. Well, if you've never taken it, it's good to maybe go with a friend, or if you can't even, drive it first, and see that if you needed to go another route, not in the middle of a situation, because you don't know where to go. If I go through the forest, if I jump over this, what's there? But at least if you went with somebody else, at least check out the area. Let's just go for a hike today and you have no idea where this leads. So you don't want to get yourself into a situation where somebody else knows that area much better than you do. So they have the upper hand. So, these are little things that can help you out of a situation. And, also, Laura carries defensive tools now. She's a small build. So, you never know what's going to happen. And pepper spray, bear spray, can keep a predator away from 15 to 30 feet. Now, you can't jog with bear spray because the canister is a little too large, but you can bike with it. You can walk a dog with it. But, it is good to carry something else because there are people out there. Not everybody's nice.
You always want to be able to change the outcome. You always want to be able to even out that outcome, to even out that fight as much as you can. And even today, when I walk the dog every day, every morning I walk the dog, it's before dawn. It's a big dog, 50 pounds, and I still carry bear spray because we know from experience that bear spray we've stopped a dog at 20 feet. So if it works on four-legged predators, it'll work on two-legged predators as well. And I carry it every single time I walk out the door to walk the dog.
And sometimes, I think because women are in the mode of jogging or having a good time out in the wild, and this is wonderful, it's a great day to be out here hiking by myself, and a lot of people like it for the solitude. But what you want to plan is for in case you run into somebody. And some cases have happened where somebody will look like they're hiking or biking and they pretend to be injured. So you're in a situation where like, oh my gosh, another hiker. Okay, well, what kind of situation are you going to be in? Should you, are you ready to carry this person? What are you going to do if you get too close and they grab you? So, these are things to think about, keep in mind. Let me get on the phone and I'm going to call rescue right now. I'm going to alert my friend that I'm out with a supposed distressed person, because the person may say, no, I don't need anybody. You do. That's the time that you do need to call, is the first time somebody says, no, that's okay. But if they're down and they look like they're injured and they're asking you for help, that's something to think about. What situation might you be in where it's just the two of you? What can you do? You can alert your friends and you can call rescue and, just put it out there where this person is and, kind of keep your distance.
Those are interesting red flags. What about a woman's gait? You really emphasize a woman's gait. I thought that was fascinating.
It's important.
Studies have shown that violent predators, while they're in prison, who've been shown videos of victims, can profile the victims just by the way they walk. And as I said earlier, I stay in shape. We both do. We both go to the gym almost on a daily basis. I am very conscious of the way I walk. I was profiled probably as a younger person because of the way that I walk and my build. But a person's gait shows if they're shuffling, if they really can't, they don't have lower body strength, if they're not a strong person to begin with. It's like a zebra in the wild for a lion. The zebra's out by itself, the antelope's out by itself. They want that victim that they can easily overcome. And those predators in the prison, and some of them scored high as psychopaths, they could tell those victims immediately. And one of the safety classes I took, the instructor said the same thing, talked about the violence against women, talked about how these violent predators know exactly what to look for by the way a woman walks. Ted Bundy said that too. He said, I can tell a victim just by the way she's walking, the way she carries her head, her gait, the way she's walking. Is she easy prey? And, that's one violent offender. So the study showed, and I believe it was by the University of Toronto, there were several researchers that did this study. And all of them said the same thing, that the predators can profile the prey just by the way that they're moving. And we think that's important information.
Mm-hmm. And they've also said that they can detect victims that have been a prior victim. Mm-hmm. So the way they walk is they would make themselves smaller, because they have been attacked. So, they would kind of like cocoon themselves. Maybe that's a way to keep themselves, safe. And, in your mind is just make yourself smaller. Nobody will know I'm here. I'll keep my head down a little bit. But it's just the opposite. That's not helping. You need to make yourself taller, kind of like they say for a bear. Put your hands up in the air, make yourself taller. Of course, not when you're walking down the street, only for bear. But what you need to do is walk tall. Mm-hmm. Put the phone away when you're out. If you need to use the phone, or if you're using your earbuds and talking, you just have to turn your head a little and look. Mm-hmm. But if you're just walking down the street, you need to, eyes front, eyes alert, shoulders back, a power walk, and, just turn and look a little more. And if somebody is following you, you give them the stare and, you keep going. But walking tall makes a big difference. Your gait is important.
And one more thing to kind of close that out is, in addition to walking tall, and if you see a predator or somebody that you believe is profiling you, look at them. Let them know that they have been seen. Don't look away and hope that they don't see you. Oh, they see you all right. But if you look at them, you are saying to them silently, I see you. I am prepared to take action on my own behalf. I'm prepared to keep myself safe. I'm not the first person you're going to want to choose. And I've done that many times, not in a, I'm going to take you on sort of way, just a confident, I see you. You've been seen. I see what you're wearing. I see how far away you are. And I see your proximity to me. And I notice that you're looking at me. Just an acknowledgement and go on. You don't want to really escalate that look any more than you have to.
Right. To be defiant about it.
Right. You don't want to get into a staring contest or an aggressive contest with them. It's just a confident, I see you, bud, and I'm going on my way.
And there's also, if you feel that you are being followed, there's no reason for you not to make a phone call and call 911. You don't need to have to put up with that. I don't know if I want to call yet. Maybe he's not. You know what? You can tell after a few blocks, or if somebody is keeping pace with you, looking over the side of the street, and you change, they change. These are things to keep in mind. It's kind of like at home where, people, they don't want to call 911. There is no reason not to call 911. On the street, in your car, call sooner than later.
Haven't you heard people say that they really didn't want to bother the police? And
all the time.
And really why that's a
they didn't think
misnomer?
it. Yes. They didn't think it was a big deal. I wasn't sure, even if there was somebody at your house and in the back. Well, I'm not sure. If you're not sure, then you can call. The police work all over 24 hours.
A lot of what you just said, resonates. And I have one personal experience. I'm sure my wife Emma's been through more, but just one where I was with her and we were sitting in our vehicle, and it was downtown. It was dark. We were waiting for somebody or something. I can't remember, but I was on my phone and I didn't see, but she was sitting in the passenger seat, and an individual came up to her window. A man came up to her window asking for help or something. And her immediate reaction was to roll down the window and see, and he reached in and he tried to grab, and I freaked out because he could have had a knife or whatever he could have done.
Right.
And I hit the gas and he ran off. I'm not sure if there was mental health issues there or what it was. But her immediate reaction was to help this individual. It could have been like you said, what women have been taught. It could have been because she's Canadian and she's very polite. But it was scary.
Right.
I've had so many friends. I've had it myself. And that's why we put it in the book, because I've had it. And I had an argument with two women that said, like I said, women can also be, thieves and predators too. But, men are in a different category when it comes to women being afraid. But still, women can still steal, women carry weapons, so that's another thing to keep in mind. In the back of your mind, a lot of women think, oh, she's just a woman, she needs something. I still ask, man or woman, I don't know you, I don't put the window down. And I've had it happen to me while I was working, off duty for multiple times. And, here I am in the car, wherever I am. I'm at the gas pump. Excuse me. I'm in the car. Excuse me. No, I'm not putting the window down. What is it? And usually they'll go back and forth. What is it they're going to need from you? They want something. So it's like when they stop you in the parking lot, you're not going to buy anything from some guy. If you came up to me in the parking lot, excuse me, oh, let me get my wallet out. I don't know you. I'm not going to buy anything from you. What is it you want? Well, it's the same thing when you're in your car and they say, excuse me, they want money or they're going to grab for something, and then you're going to say no. So now you put the window down and you're in a very tight spot. And that's usually when people do pull a weapon on you because you have nowhere to go. And usually the car isn't on. So by the time you're going to fiddle for the key, get the car started, it usually doesn't happen. And that's when people end up getting attacked. So, the best thing, do not, as much as your finger, and I've had many friends say the same thing, as their finger starts going to open the window, just condition yourself. No, sorry, I don't have time, and start backing the car out.
And I think the takeaway from that too is that you can talk through the window,
Sure.
And in the story that you told me, the woman wanted to talk to you and you said, I can hear you through the window. Tell me what you need. And her insistence was roll the window down, even though that conversation had just occurred. I hear you. What do you need?
That's a great point.
So, if somebody really needs help, all they need to say is, ma'am, can you call 911? I have, because in reality, I'm not going to be able to help some guy's car. What is it you think I'm going to do? And a lot of times, a lot of the ploys will be, oh my God, the baby is stuck in, oh, well, I'm going to call. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to run over there and bang on the window that you couldn't do yourself to your own car window. So these are things that you have to think. But what predators look to manipulate you quickly. So there's my dog is in the car, the baby's in the car. Oh my gosh, there's somebody sick. And these are things that resonate with women. Men, here, why don't you call? And that's pretty much what men say. But, women tend to say, oh, where is it? Like Superwoman, and out comes the cape and I'm going to help. No, you never leave your spot. So wherever you are, if somebody wants to direct you to over there, if you can only come with me over there, you don't ever want to leave where you are to go help someone. You say, I'll call 911 right now. I'll get them here to the parking lot. And you'll hear them say, that's okay. And they'll leave. They don't want that.
I actually worked this case with the family.
Oh boy.
Not with law enforcement. So I worked this case with the family. I visited the Monpaw Heritage Trail in Bel Air, Maryland twice. At both times I went down and met members of Rachel's family. But this was in a well-populated trail right in the middle of town. It was daylight out. It was around 7 p.m., but it was still sunny out. What do you make of this kind of perpetrator?
He knew the area, so he most probably surveilled the area, had been there before. Most probably, these well-known areas, it doesn't take long to sit there, walk the trail, see who jogs on the trail. What time is it? Oh, it's 5 o'clock. Let's see who jogs at this hour where it's kind of getting dark and, is it less people? So they look and they see, let's see, 9 o'clock in the morning. Oh, too many people. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. One person, two people, so a lot of them do the recon and make themselves comfortable with the area wherever they're staying or hiding out. And they become familiar with the area. So they know if somebody sees it, they know that if I cut up through this path, I know how to get out of here. They've already figured it out. Most of the time, they're not going to be stuck in the middle of a crime and not know how to get out of that area.
I think it's safe to say that in, this crime, tragically, as in many other crimes targeting women who are out and about, these are predators, certainly. I think it's safe to call them hunters. They know how to hunt. As Joy said, this predator certainly surveilled the area. He knew the best time. He knew the best location. He was waiting for a victim to come. I mean, let's face it, those are hunting tactics. He was somebody who had previously had law enforcement encounters. They had DNA. It took them a while to catch up with that. But in all of these crimes of this nature, women out and about, women in isolated areas, the attacks are almost 99% of the time sexually motivated. They are always predators who are hunters, who know how to hunt for their prey. And sadly, in this case, the prey are women.
Mm-hmm.
In this specific case, I mean, obviously, as we mentioned, she was on a well-populated trail on a Saturday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's cases such as Molly Tibbetts, who was, I think, running down a road, so she was isolated by herself.
Mm-hmm.
But how does a lone female jogger stay vigilant when she's in a populated area where she should feel comfortable, and you almost feel like you have a guardian, whether you're male or female, just because of the numbers of people around, that you don't feel like anybody's going to attack you because there is human surveillance, that there are people around. So how do you remain vigilant even in a populated area?
Sometimes they blend in. So you never know in what circumstance they pretend to look like a jogger, pretend to wait for a family member, so you don't know. So, all you can do is protect yourself, maybe carrying or wearing a pepper spray or, some type of device that you would have to, that you could carry to fend off somebody.
Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about situational awareness. To be aware of your surroundings. We don't know what the circumstances were. Was he pretending to tie his shoe? Was he, what was he doing? Did he jump out from behind a tree? Whatever the situation is, there are defensive tools that you can carry, pepper spray, in your hand, etc. But to be vigilant, to use, as Joy talked about earlier, our peripheral vision, to always be alert, which is tragic because one of the reasons people go out in nature to hike, to jog, to run is for the solitude, is for the beauty of nature. It's really to clear their head. A lot of runners talk about, I clear my head. I really get in tune. I get in the flow when I jog. And so that vigilance is important, certainly. But I think another thing to consider is the system that allows these repeat offenders to constantly fall through the cracks, the under prosecution. Many of these predators have been, involved with law enforcement before, have been involved in attacks, have been involved in social media, calls for violence against women. And that the system, the prosecutors really don't take this predation seriously and really don't listen to victims when we report, which, lends itself to another situation, is how many victims don't report. These are high profile cases. This is a high-profile case, a tragic case, but I submit to you of the many, many women that we know who have told us that they have been attacked, rarely have they reported to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. And it just seems like the predator finally gets arrested is not getting the time enough for that crime. And should there be other crimes, which is usually too bad for the jury, is when they find out later, oh, if only I knew that. Well, when they tend to have the bad past, but they get that one last crime and it turns out to murder. So they go, well, that was aggravated assault. That was aggravated robbery. That's not murder. Okay, well, it tends to build up and then it turns into murder, but then you don't hear the past. So they leave out the past and, the jury is left to look at, oh, this one crime, but they had years of all these other incidents. And so it wasn't a one-off. And that's usually how they're being prosecuted. They're being prosecuted as just this case today. And then they, tend to nickel and dime it. And by the time you turn around, the person is out.
So I think it would, to sort of wrap this part of it up, is I think it would be safe to say if it wasn't Rachel, it would have been somebody else. And that tragically, that hunter was out that day to prey. And, that whether it was this particular victim, it would have been another victim otherwise. And I think
it was.
Yeah. And we think that's really the tragedy of it.
But is the media attention in some way or shape or form good overall because it draws attention to this type of crime and that it is happening?
I think it's very helpful. People need to see it and they need to realize what's out there and what can happen on a college campus, in the area, leaving a bar in a good neighborhood, so all of the myths go out the window.
I agree. I think that media attention is so important because, let's face it, people learn through repetition. And if we don't hear about these things happening, if we don't hear about, as tragic and terrible as they are, then it sort of falls away from our consciousness and we pay attention to something else. And if we continue to have the media attention on violence against women, the fact that they are getting younger, the fact that, young men are reacting badly when a bad breakup occurs. If we don't hear about it and we're not made aware of it through the media, and we all pay attention to the media, whether it's social media, whether it's national or international media, these cases, these events, these situations that keep recurring and recurring and recurring, the only way we're going to become aware of patterns is through the media, focusing attention on it.
And what's important to remember is when the media, people say, oh, why does the media keep going over this? Well, when you think about it, is this person lost their life. And, it's important for people to realize that in them losing their life, they're trying to save other people.
You mentioned the online part of it, and that one of the Google searches that's been increasing over the years is how to harm women. When I read that off your one of the articles on your website, I actually Googled that because I wanted to see what would come up. And thankfully, just a regular Google search, it's all about victim awareness and places women can go if they are being harmed. But obviously, the the men that are Googling that for, or searching that for nefarious purposes are using other sources, deep web, dark web, whatever.
Right.
So tell me about that a little. Why you've seen that go up? Why is that going up? What's going on there?
So I just did that just as an experiment, really. And I was actually stunned with the results to see how, I mean, for one thing, you wouldn't think that would actually be a Google search, how to hurt women, how to hurt a woman. And to see that it went up significantly during the pandemic. I mean, violence against women certainly increased during the pandemic. But again, I think a lot of this violence against women, and the reason that it is increasing, is because of these online forums. And also, not only, the people who are monetizing these courses, who are monetizing this content on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, but also the algorithms. So let's say a young man wants to learn how to date. He wants to learn how to, improve his self-esteem. He wants to have a girlfriend. And studies have shown that within a half an hour, he will be subjected and in fact directed to misogynistic and violent content against women, which starts off as curiosity. I'd like to really know how to, ask somebody out in my 9th grade class, or, just even approach her and talk to her, because they're a little overwhelmed, to, what, she's probably never going to go out with me because I don't look like that guy and I don't play football. You know what? The hell with her. And, they're being pulled into this violent content, in their formative years. And that can help, we don't believe, but lead to offline violence against women.
Tell me about this this concept that you talk about, the myth of the perfect perpetrator.
People think that the perfect perpetrator is a stranger. So, we've talked a lot about strangers and attacking women. And, tragically, as we've talked about, it happens, and it happens far too often. What is not talked about enough is the fact that there is no perfect perpetrator, that there is no profile. Anybody can be a perpetrator. And for women, the most dangerous myth, I believe, of the perfect perpetrator is that we don't know them. And, as we just talked about again, is that too many times the victim does know the perpetrator. And for far too many times, that perpetrator may be in their own home because it's somebody that they're involved with. So it's not just an acquaintance, but violence against women in dating situations, in domestic abuse, domestic violence, it happens in our home, and it happens way too often by the people who are supposed to love us the most, the people that we're involved with, the people that we often have children with. Those are the perpetrators, and that's the perpetrator, that we believe that's never talked about. Those facades are incredibly effective. Perfect perpetrators, if you will, have very charming exteriors. To the outside world, they may be the nicest guy you ever met. They may be the perfect partner. And, as Joy has seen in her personal life, and I can assure you that many members of my family, have dated and married, nice guys who turned out to be the polar opposite and have been very abusive. Mm-hmm. So we're not advocating that people, particularly women, are suspicious of everybody, but we do advocate that women look for patterns, to reassess our own patterns when we're out and about. If you generally walk this way to class, vary your pattern. But also, when you're dating somebody, do they try to dominate and control? Do they try to tell you what to do? Maybe first in a friendly, sort of sarcastic way, change your clothes, change your this, change your that. Do they start to isolate you from your family and friends? You know, how are those patterns affecting you? And, you know, as a woman, how can we be aware of dating patterns?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it also shows up as a joke, as I was just, why did you show up here? So it's not stalking, but why are you here? What, oh, I didn't expect you. So the excuses started. Told you I was going out with my friends. Well, I just wanted to see you because I love you. So the excuses for the behavior start. Why were you going through my phone? Well, I just wanted to be sure of this, or who you were going with, or who you calling now. So, you know, once you start to hear that and the excuses on top of that, that's not something you should put up with. If you're feeling that they don't trust you, that's a problem that they have. And that's not something that you should have to put up with, because it's only going to get worse, as we could see from most recent cases.
You mentioned that that in a lot of cases where men attack and murder women, we turn the tables. And I know defense lawyers have a job to do, but we turn the tables and we victim blame the woman and turn the man into a victim. You know, she had substance abuse issues. She was engaged in occasional sex work. We victim blame her. And then on the other side, oh, he was abused as a child. And
Mhm.
we try to make him look more human and you know, and and empathize with him.
Mhm.
Is that something you see on a regular basis with a lot of these cases?
Yes, absolutely. And the first thing that you'll hear pop up, especially in a sexual assault case, is the defense is it was consensual. Nobody says consensual unless they're on trial.
Mhm.
So, you know, already you're defending yourself. Not we had a relationship. If there was no connection, no relationship, you know, the consensual part by the defense is grabbing at straws for something to make it look like, well, the victim had a relationship with him. They must have been dating. They must have had some connection. So they want to put some thought into the jury's mind that she did something, and not him, not this person. Why, he's a stellar person. And usually they'll look at his background. Why, he's never done this before. And that's usually the problem right there. So the jury looks at him, looks at her, and, you know, that's usually where the problem is. And, you know, they start looking her over, and they shouldn't.
Right. If there's no such thing as a perfect perpetrator, there's no such thing as a perfect victim. You know, we expect our victims to be a certain way, to not have worn the wrong thing, to not have done the wrong thing. And I think the reason that there is such victim blaming is because if we blame the victim and not the perpetrator, we can tell ourselves that we're safe. We can say, oh, if she was drinking, if she hadn't been wearing, if she hadn't been doing, that means that she was at fault. He attacked her. And that means that we, whatever we're doing, sitting as the judge and jury, mentally judging these victims, that means that we're going to be okay. And wherever we're wearing, we're not drinking, we're not doing this, or we're not doing that, that we are going to be safe. And truthfully, that's a myth, because any of us can be attacked for whatever reason. Maybe we were drinking too much. You know what? That doesn't make us a victim. Maybe a woman was wearing a short skirt. That doesn't mean she was a victim. It just means, hey, she wants to be cute. It doesn't mean that she's a victim. So to turn these tables a little bit, and, we mentioned the Pellicot case in France, that we have heard people say, that grandmother that was attacked and raped 80 over 100 times, that she had done something wrong by not being more suspicious of her husband. When does that victim blaming stop? And to realize it's always the fault of the perpetrator, and that it's never the fault of the victim. And again, there's no such thing as a perfect victim.
And it doesn't matter what profession they have. And I think that's a problem. But what you're seeing today is a lot of the domestic violence cases, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're, oh, look, what an upstanding citizen. So they're showing that, and they're saying, again, well, he's never done this before. All you need to do is do it one time.
Right.
That's all for some of these cases, and you murdered her. So, it doesn't matter. It's look at the evidence and not what that person does or did for a living.
This has been an enlightening discussion. Do you have either of you have any final thoughts?
I think I want to leave your listeners with this, is that, as we talked about in the beginning, women are taught to minimize their instincts, to minimize when they believe that they're in danger. And what I want to say is believe women, for society to believe women, but most importantly, for a woman to believe herself and to have faith in her own instincts and her own ability to keep herself safe.
Exactly. Listen to your intuition, believe in yourself, and carry defensive tools.